Hello, my name's Rob and I'm from Team Hope. Perhaps you're aware that the world's tallest land-based mountain is Mount Everest, 8,848 metres high. That's nearly 9 kilometres, the cruising height of most jet airliners. That is one seriously big mountain. It's said to be, and with good reason, the harshest place on earth. Last count, 321 people have died trying to climb it. The oxygen level at the summit is 1/3 that of sea level. The average summertime temperature is minus 19 degrees Celsius. The average wintertime temperature is minus 35. The lowest temp they've recorded up there is minus 60. It's always below freezing. Most bodies are left there. Too hard to bring them back. If you get injured, you die. Too hard to bring an injured person back. It's the mountaineer's understanding that if you once in a lifetime to climb that mountain, nobody's going to stop to help you. They're heading for their goal. So the question arises, who was the first person that made it to the top? Well, the accepted answer to that is Sir Edmund Hillary and his guide, Tenzing Norgay, Sherpa guide. They did that on the 29th of May in 1953. Said to be the first person or people to reach the summit. Or were they? Hillary and Norgay opened the floodgates, but before them, a man named George Mallory might have just done it. He was born on the 18th of June in 1886. He was said to be the most skilled mountaineer that ever scaled a mountain. They called him the human spider. He climbed sheer cliff faces like a caterpillar. He was a freak. He led the third British expedition in 1924, 29 years before Hillary. On the 8th of June in that year, he and Andrew Irvine were approaching the final stage of the summit. They were being observed by a man called Noel Odell through a telescope from the final stage camp, 1,000 metres below the summit. Now, you're probably aware that they have stage camps to get up to the top, and Odell was at the highest stage camp to the summit. He saw through the telescope they were perhaps 200 to 300 metres from the summit. And then suddenly clouds came and a storm hit, and that was the last that anyone saw them alive. Did they make it? Did they get to the top before they perished? It was a mystery. Nobody really knew. But here's where it gets interesting. On the 1st of May in 1999, Mallory's body was discovered in an amazing state of preservation. And that's where the mystery deepened. There's a strong case that perhaps they'd actually done it. They got to the summit. You can look up on the internet, see photos of the body, which is a bit macabre, but if you look at the picture behind me, you can see the position where his body was found, and you can see that it's well back from the summit. They'd already passed that position. And everyone knew Mallory's determination that he wouldn't have got that close and not gone to the summit, no matter how hard it was. He was just that sort of guy. So you look at what he did, got to the top, and the question is asked, could we ever prove it? The other thing that they discovered was his colleague Andrew Irvine's ice axe. It looked from the position, and you can see that on the picture behind me too, that they were very much like they were on the way down when the fall occurred. Debate continues, but it looks very much like Mallory may have been the first man to reach the summit of Mount Everest. You see, he was determined. He promised his wife. He had a picture of her which he kept in his wallet. He was going to leave it at the summit. He promised her he'd do that. When they found his body, they found his wallet. It was in such good preservation they could see receipts for climbing equipment he'd bought in London, but there was no picture of his wife. So, who got it there first? Guess what? We won't know in this life. Why did I tell you this? Well, I do love a good mystery. I have to commit a bit to that. But they had a memorial dinner for him. Big memorial dinner. The whole mountaineering world was devastated. He was the king of mountaineering in his day. At that dinner they had a large blow-up photo of the summit of Mount Everest on the wall behind the main table. And the guest speaker was a member of Mallory's party. And he said these words that I want to quote to you now and leave a simple thought with you. He said, turned around and spoke to the mountain picture behind him. He said these words, "You defeated us once, Mount Everest. You defeated us twice. And now you have defeated us 3 times. But one day we will defeat you because you can't get any bigger, but we can." You know, sometimes we may be confronted by a problem that stops us from reaching a goal. The problem may not get any bigger, but we can. Now, to be sure, some problems do get bigger. I'm not saying they don't. Financial problems can get bigger. Relational problems can get bigger. Political problems get bigger. Arguments and disputes get bigger. But some problems don't get bigger, but they are of a size or of a magnitude that they can block our way in life, and we just can't find a way around them. Maybe it's an exam you really wanted to pass to go on to the next step, or maybe it's a job application that didn't work out, or maybe it's a sporting goal, or maybe it's kicking a habit. We can't change what's going on outside of us, but we can change what's happening inside. The problem or challenge can't get any bigger, but we can. I do a lot of public speaking. It's part of my work. I enjoy it. And I remember the first time I was asked to do it was an offering prayer, a prayer for the collection, if you will. And I said to myself, well, Pastor asked me to do it, and I said yes. And then I said afterwards, "Noble, you idiot, why did you say yes to that?" And I remember it was an evening service, and all Sunday afternoon I went to the toilet about 50 times. I was a nervous wreck. And I wrote out this 5-sentence prayer. And then came to the point in the service, and the pastor called me up, and I got up to the pulpit, and I sat there, and I saw all these people staring at me, and I nearly died all over again. And then it was time for me to lead the prayer, and I said, "Let us pray." Or I tried to say it, nothing came out. I went, "Let us pray." I was so nervous and dry, and anyway, somehow or other I struggled through it, and we said thanks to God for the offering. But I didn't leave it at that. That sort of nervousness wasn't going to get bigger for me, but I could get bigger. So I went to college, and I studied public speaking, and I practiced, and I worked hard at it, and I got critiqued by fellow students. I really wanted to get better at it, and hopefully I did, and now I do it frequently. The problem couldn't get any bigger, but I could. Now I want to bring us together by telling you about a guy in the Bible called Joseph. Now don't get confused with the earthly father of Jesus. This Joseph lived a long time before that. He was right back in the beginning of the Old Testament. He lived in a land called Canaan, which is now Israel. He was born about somewhere between 3,800 and 4,000 years ago. Now Joseph had 10 older brothers. In Jewish culture, the older brother, whose name was Reuben, had most of the power, and the younger brother, who was Joseph, had no power. When he was 17, his dad brought him an elaborate, beautiful, colourful robe. And he loved it. But this didn't go down too well with his brothers, thank you very much. See, Joseph was Dad's favourite. So he had a dream. And the dream he had was called him to lead even over his older brothers. He told his brother about this dream. He said, guys, I've been called to be your leader. His brothers started to hate him even more. He didn't ask for this leadership, but it was something he was called to do. The call to lead, the roadblock. What happened? Did everybody live happily ever after? No, his brothers got very bitter and resentful. They took him out into the countryside and wanted to kill him. But Reuben saved his life. But when Reuben wasn't around, they threw him down an empty well. It was deep enough so that he couldn't get out, but not too deep to kill him. He was trapped in this well. Trade caravan was going past, so they fished him out, sold him as a slave. But he was called to lead. Now he's a slave. He was called to lead even over his own brothers. He had these powerful dreams. He knew God was talking to him. Instead of going forwards, instead of getting bigger, instead of getting stronger, he's gone back. Now he's ended up as a slave. And to top it off, his brothers took his fancy robe of many colours and they smeared it with animal blood, and they took it home to Dad and told him that a wild animal had killed Joseph. How sick is that? Dad was devastated. Joseph was a slave. His new owners took him to Egypt, sold him to a guy called Potiphar. Did the leadership call leave him? No. God didn't get it wrong. He was called to lead. So he's a slave in this guy Potiphar's home. It's a big home, lots of servants. Not long before he becomes the head servant, he leads the other servants. And then something bad happened again. Potiphar's wife accused him of doing something he didn't do. She said he was trying to do his thing with her. He didn't, but she was so angry that he wouldn't play along. She lied to her husband and said he did do it. He was thrown straight into prison. There's no due process there, no justice. This is ancient Egypt. So, called to lead, betrayed by his brothers, thrown in a well, sold as a slave, falsely accused, in prison. Did the call to lead leave him? It wasn't long before Joseph was put in charge of all the other prisoners. He began to run things throughout the prison. He was growing as a leader. If he could run things in a hellhole like a prison, he had to be stronger and he had to become a better leader. As it happened, there were 2 political prisoners in there. Got into trouble with the big man, the Pharaoh. And both these guys had dreams. See, Joseph knew about dreams. He had the gift of interpreting them. And he was called for. These 2 guys in the prison were really upset. And they dreamed in 3 days it was going to be the Pharaoh's birthday. Both men would be called before him. The butler would be restored and the baker would be lynched. And that's exactly what happened. The butler was restored and Joseph said to him, hey, can you put in a good word for me when you see the Pharaoh? The butler said, yeah, sure. But he forgot. And 2 years passed. Called to leave. Kidnapped, sold as a slave. Falsely accused. Forgotten. But Joseph trusted God. And he knew what God had called him to do. So instead of shrinking, he was growing. I don't think the problems could get any bigger, but he was getting bigger because of his friendship with God. After 2 years, the Pharaoh had a couple of dreams, and he was telling the people about it in his court. And bingo, the butler remembers. That guy Joseph in prison. He interpreted the dreams and it turned out he was exactly right. So he told Pharaoh and so Joseph was called in. Pharaoh told him about his dreams. He had 7 good years and all the cows got fat. 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine when the cows starved. Pharaoh said, what's all this mean, man? They tell me you got the gift of interpreting dreams. He said, this nation is going to have 7 good years. But you better use those good years, start stockpiling the grains in the good years and saving for the 7 bad years that are going to follow. And do you know what? That made a lot of sense to Pharaoh. And he became a major leader in Egypt. In fact, he became second only to Pharaoh. The 7 years of good passed and the 7 years of famine came. And the famine was so bad it even reached into Israel, where Joseph's brother lived, and they heard that Egypt had saved grain, so they said, let's go down, we'll buy some grain in Egypt. So they go down to Egypt to buy food. And Joseph, they didn't recognise, because Egyptians would quite often with their leaders would shave their heads and just have one plait coming out. And he had all this fancy authoritative clothes on. So the brothers had come to buy grain and food, and Joseph was in complete authority over them, just as his dream had said all those years before. So he had them in the palm of his hand. He could have had them put to death. You want to know what he did? He forgave them. Not only did he save Egypt from the famine, because he sent food back into Israel, but he also saved his family and he saved the Jewish people. Egypt became a home for the Jews for 400 years. He told his brother what they intended for harm, God used for good. See, God does that sort of thing. So the problems didn't go away for Joseph, but they didn't make him shrink as a person. Instead, he got bigger and stronger to do what he'd been called to do. I want to ask this question, how about you? Have you hit a brick wall? Joseph shows us that when God is involved, he can grow bigger and stronger in the face of problems. How? Well, Team Hope says, always hope for the right thing and don't hope alone. You can say within your heart and within the body of a bunch of friends who are Christians, you can be endowed with a very real strength. And you can say to a problem that's confronting you, that's staring you in the face, you defeated me once. You challenged to my dream. You defeated me twice. And now you've defeated me 3 times. But one day I will defeat you, because you can't get any bigger, but I can. I want to encourage you to think about these things. My name's Rob and I'm from Team Hope.